Did it start? There we go. Perfect. Share my screen. Perfect. So good morning again, everyone. Here we are. We've finished our sprint 28, moving on to 29. The URL for this board has changed. I think we had mentioned that last time as well. So just make sure that you're looking at the most updated one. You should see this on the one you're looking at. There's a lot of things we did. Some of it is continuing on some of the process we went over before, specifically like institution reporting a change. We won't be demoing all of it because it's not quite there yet. It's just sort of one more milestone on the way to that completed feature. So there's not much, it's not really worth spending some time to review something that will also likely be reviewing next sprint. So with that, accomplished goals. A lot of things on the technical side. We've been just working on cleaning up some code after the last year of development. We've implemented some validations to make sure that our federal partners are able to accept the files that we send correctly, specifically with the way provinces work. On the development side, continuing on the institution reports of change, creating the pending offering and how pending offerings work. The PIR application overlapping program year validations. That's somewhat related to how pending offerings work, which that part will be the main focus of the demo today. On the ministry side, the approve and deny pending offerings, basically the other side of the coin of the institution creating that pending offering. The file upload notification when a student uploads a file, which we will also be going through today. Some more work on the reassessment structure that we won't be demoing today. It's just another milestone. So once it's more complete, then we'll be going through it. Continuing our QA and design approach, which will be demoing some of the UI changes as well. Because of the focus on this demo, it's going to be a little everywhere. So I'm going to try and streamline it the best as I can, but I will try and take it slower just because it's a bit of bouncing around. But with most of those couple features, we might be able to end a little early today. For a business context, pretty much the status quo from last time. So our team changes, that was actually the same from last sprint. And then Elise, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So folks will probably recall the MVP scope list that we have in our feature owner area that Arena showed us back in March. Basically, we're doing a lot of working on that, making sure that any of the acceptance criteria that are outstanding for any of those items are in process to be provided to Andrew and the dev team. So we're working on that. So for example, we've been doing some work on restrictions, getting some pieces there. There were some outstanding application questions. So if you're wondering about that, just a reminder, we're not updating that MVP document, but we're going to move towards everything is green, ready for testing. We have some different sessions that we have going on that people may or may not be invited to. We're calling them different things. We've tried a few different names. So we've had some working group sessions where we're kind of working with design, making sure we've got things sorted out. And we've also had some what we've called walkthrough sessions, which means we're more on the other side. We've got most of it built, making sure that feature owners and other folks are feeling comfortable with what we have. So we've got lots of those things happening, and they'll be definitely happening over the next few weeks as well, particularly as we focus on some of the finance pieces. Blaine's aware of that, and we're still working through some of our restrictions. So that's good. And then at the same time, I'm also meeting with each of the teams, and we're going through their processes to make sure that people have a solid understanding and are feeling good about what are the processes and how is that going to happen in the new system. And through that, we're identifying some gaps and some future enhancements as well. So we'll be tracking those as well. Back to you, Andrew.
Awesome, thanks. Something that I forgot to mention on here is we're currently doing some file integration testing with our federal partners, which Elise touched on there, which is why we've had to do some extra work just in the middle to make sure that those are working correctly. So let's just jump into it here. I'm going to do my best again to make this as straightforward as possible. We're going to start with the file upload notification, just because that's a nice little easy one here. This is when a student uploads a file to their account. Let's just make sure I have a student here. We've seen this part before about when a student can upload a file. I'm just going to select a document purpose. I'm not going to put in an application number, and I'm just going to drag a random file here. At this point, when a student hits submit, you'll see a document has been submitted. At this point, there's an email floating around the internet that's about to arrive in my email. If it all works correctly, there it is. All right, I'll pull it over 1 second. Obviously, we don't download pictures by default. That's just our mail side. So in here, this is standard email notification. You'll notice it did go to me. That's just for development reasons that it's going to me directly. This in future would not. It would go to the business areas Jira system to create tickets, basically the same as it is now. So in here, you have your name, date of birth, document purpose, and the time. So that's most of that feature. Again, pretty straightforward. The only thing we added on was the notification part. Yeah, that's pretty much it for that one.
So Andrew, that's just so folks that maybe aren't aware, that is a mimicking of what our current system does. So right now, when students upload something through their dashboard and it gets put into SFAS, an email is sent to the SABC generic inbox, and then a Jira ticket is created for triaging. So what we've done is we've mimicked that process. And so an email will go to the SABC inbox, where Alana and team will triage that as appropriate, and then rather than going into SFAS to find it, the ministry user will go into SIMS to find the document. So a good example of lift and shift.
Awesome, thanks for that. Just going back to the board here. So this next chunk here about pending offering, you can kind of just ignore the stickies. I'm just going to go over what it is and how it works sort of from beginning to end as best as I can. Again, as you guys can imagine, with a pending offering, it being able to be declined or approved, it's going to touch the institution side when they're doing program information requests, when they're creating the offering. It's going to affect the student application for how that they select the offerings, as well as the ministry side. So again, we'll step our way through it. It is nearly identical, so this might help, to how programs work. So the way an institution can create a program, if it basically flags any of the validation rules, it will not be created as approved right off the bat. Someone has to go in and approve it for it to be able to basically be assigned to a student, either by the student selecting it or during a PIR. So let's just start with what it looks like here. Just finished this, so if you see any bugs, you'll see it firsthand. So that's not the one I wanted. I wanted computer science. So here we have a offering here that I created. If we look at this offering, you'll see that there is a banner here for this program must be approved with this component. This is the same as it worked before with how it validates against the program, as well as there's any other things about the just like the other area. So if it was only a full-time program and you selected part-time, you'd get the same thing as this. Same thing with the on-site online portion. So in this, again, just going to, this was called test 1. At this point, students cannot select this offering because it's impending. And during a program information request, you can't select that offering either. What I can do, just because I believe I have one ready, is we have a program information request for this application. And you can see test 1 is not there. And that's because it is not approved. I'm going to now log in as a ministry user, navigate to the programs and offerings, and approve that program. There is a lot of data here that we've been doing for testing. So again, please just bear with me. On here, we'll see that there is my test offering here in pending status. If I were to go in here and click approve, and I'm just going to say it's approved. Again, the exact same thing as how program works. You'll see that now it's approved. It's just ignore the pending there. We found that this morning. That one is now approved. If I were now to go back to the institution, so back to the institution, we're going to go look at my computer science offering again, and you'll see it's approved. Perfect. So at this point, if it's available that for students to select, they can select it because it is now approved, as well as during my program information request, if it's for the correct year and I did the data correctly, we'll see it show up here. So now it's able to be selectable during a PIR because it's now approved. Great. With that as well, I think I have we had to move one attribute during this one, which is how basically the offering can be assigned to a student. We had this during the creation of the PIR originally, which is this question here, which basically says, do you want it on the list for students to select or not? As we know, this is now for part-time and full-time students. So if you have that one-off program or something for for a student that needs to be approved and goes through, if you select no here, it's the exact same process, just it will not show up for the student to select. So again, if my data is correct, we will see this is the flipping back and forth part. So now I'm a student, I've logged in, great. There's now an approved offering on the list. I can now select the correct one. So as a student coming back, you'll see I went computer science. My study period isn't listed. That's why the PIR came forward and why I saw as an institution, I could then select that. In here, you'll see that now test 1 is there. Great, now I can go through and I don't actually need a PIR. In this case, though, the institution could just complete it and everything's fine as well.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes.
Is there some notification that ministry users get when there is a new submission from a PSI for their offerings?
No, at least
So
not yet.
Ministry users have to sort of monitor a queue or offerings? Is that how that works?
What we can do is
it's a good point, David. The business had said that what they want is that an institution will ask for an exception, essentially, because if the offering didn't pass the validations, it means that it is not in alignment with our policy, and therefore the institution needs to ask for an exception, and that's going to be the trigger by which the institution will then know to look it up, take a look at it, and make a decision.
And they ask for an exception by
email.
Okay.
Or they call us, I guess, but they reach out to us.
Okay.
Yep. It's not an automated process. So this is not something that the business said that they would be looking at every day. They would go and look for this when an institution has requested an exception to policy, because this is definitely, it allows an exception to be made, but it is an exception to policy and therefore it needs to be adjudicated.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. So maybe I can just kind of clarify just to remind folks, because I know we jump all over the place, but what happened before is that when an institution created a program, when that program passed the validation, it moved to approved status and it was available on the list for students to choose from. When the program was approved, institutions could then add offerings. However, when they added an offering that did not pass the system validations, it didn't go anywhere. It just kind of sat there. You weren't able to submit it, and therefore the ministry user wasn't able to grant a submission. So this was a problem that we identified in our review, and we said that that's not going to work. We need offerings to be able to go into pending status so that ministry users can then make an informed decision and grant some kind of an exception which would allow that to move to approved status, which is exactly, pardon me, what Andrew has shown us today. So we'll do some testing on that. But this came out of our EPI review. So we discovered this problem and went, oh, there's something missing. And this was one of the things that we identified was missing. So super appreciate that it's gotten fixed.
Awesome. I don't think that there's too much more to go through with this. Again, just to review super quickly, this drop down here, approved offerings only, offerings that could be available for all students or a specific student. If it's pending or declined, it won't show up here, so you can't assign it. Same thing for a student. Basically clicking it or choosing that offering while they're doing their application must be approved and must be available for all the students. Everything else is, as you said, Elise, effectively mirroring exactly how programs work. So with that, just going to go through sort of a few things next. So we did update some designation text here, which again isn't that crazy, but what we have been doing that this kind of ties into is from the accessibility stuff that we've been talking about the last sprint, the last 2 sprints, we started going through, our UX team has been identifying the things that need to be fixed, for example, colors, size, label tags, those kinds of things, as well as just basically just an update to make things in compliance with accessibility and just some digital practices that should be done. Just some of these were done very long ago. We have put an example here, which I will also quickly look into on the board. This one here, for example, this is the adding an institution location. As you can see, this looks kind of odd. Like it just looks like very plain, something that's I wrote up in Microsoft Word in 10 minutes or something like that. As well as like the headers and stuff don't have the correct tags, so screen readers won't work, and any contrast issues and those types of things. Over here, you'll see what it looks like now. So again, it has the correct contrast, it has the correct spacing. These have the correct tags. That's more of like a technical thing, but we have to do that to make it so screen readers and the different accessibility technologies work properly, as well as like things like tabbing through fields, and most of those things. Again, this isn't going to be a we'll do every single page, but we have done some of them. I'm in the institution page right now, so I'm just going to go to the institution details, for example. So basically everything from this down has had a bit of a facelift. All the contrast and all that passes the accessibility. These have the correct, I'll call them H tags for those of you who know what that is. And then, yeah, we've done a few different pages there. Oh, bless you, whoever that was. So again, this one, as you can see, has not been done. Different pages have and different have it. So we're kind of in this interim state, but that's the goal that we'll be doing for a whole bunch of these pages. If we were to look at the, whoops, I'm the complete wrong area here. don't know if I can look at a approved one, but same thing here. So the appropriate designation text here, and standard scroll area, contrast, etc. This one we've almost done. Again, some of these we need to take another quick glance through, but it's starting to come together. Things should look a lot more cleaner and a lot more consistent. So if you're seeing a page that, for example, looks like this and things don't look right, we just haven't gotten to it yet. But with that, go through every page that we've been doing because that might be a little boring. But before, after, right here on the board, most of it's contrast, headers, and just clean up facelift type things. As well, what we've been doing is on the text side, trying to make things more consistent. So there's not some pages that look a certain way and some look and feel a different way. And just making things a lot more consistent. Oh, thank you, Lynn. You wrote it here. Color contrast, headings, system components, and all the details that we've been talking about the last sprint or two in the demos. So again, won't harp on that or touch on that too much more. That's mostly it for the demo. Again, I said it was quick. There has been a lot that's been done. Likely next sprint, we'll be going through some of those features that we won't be going through today just because they're like half done. They've made massive progress on them, but some of them take a lot of work. One of the big ones we've been working on is basically the concept and the work to do with reassessments and these file changes and certain other small things like that. For Sprint 29, again, this is just a conceptual thinking right now. We don't do our sprint planning until after this, so subject to change as per normal. Continuing on some of the technical debt to really clean things up and make them as stable as possible. Working on some UI changes for Scholastic Standing, part-time offerings. There's a different attribute we need that currently we have hard-coded in the assessment that we need to resolve. That's the course load. Ministry, some restrictions work, ministry file upload, add course load to part-time offerings, which we just set up there. More UX updates, continuing on the testing, more things with the accessibility, and basically, yeah, just continuing on. Feedback, we'll do just as we did last time. The mural board is there, and I believe Teresa and Robin are probably watching it right now. With that, the mod calendar, or sorry, the mod mailbox, sorry, is always there as well. We'll try and do questions in 15 minutes so we can end a little early. But let me see. I don't know if my notifications just aren't working, but the chat seemed pretty quiet so far. Nope, it just wasn't dinging.
We've had a few questions. Yeah, I put them up on the board there. Elise, I think you've addressed a
Sure.
few already.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's any more, we have some time.
Sure. So maybe I can just speak to a couple of them and just provide a little bit more questions. So is there any messaging for students if their program or offering isn't there? So did just want to flag that we thought it would be timely to go back over programs and offerings next week at the Mod Business Check-in. So we'll go over that with folks and we can do a bit more of a fulsome and more timely response. But essentially, no, there is not a pop-up for students. But what there is that students select off the drop-down list of programs. And if their program isn't there, there's a little box that they have to tick that says my program isn't listed. Similarly for the offering. And so that's how we've done that. And then what happens is that when their program and or offering isn't there, we ask the student to provide some information because the school, of course, needs to try to figure out what's going on. And the student may or may not be registered, of course, at this point, in order for the school to provide a program that can be evaluated. So that's how we've done that at this point. We can certainly show you more on Wednesday. And I think Nikki's question is a really good follow-up to that, which is, okay, so if the the student selects my program isn't there or my offering isn't there, then the school provides the information. But by then the student has already declared. They've already said everything I've told you is accurate. So we do need to make sure then that what the school information the student is accepting. And so we plan for that through after the NOA, the student has to accept that process and continue to move forward. So, and we'll certainly be looking for feedback. We're going to do what we're going to call a legal review. So we'll get our legal folks to take a look at the declaration, all of those different points and our new process to make sure that we are meeting any legal requirements. Nikki, did you have a follow-up question to that or?
Well, I'm just curious about the process because what we found in the past is when we propose a change, we generally have a legal review prior to making that change to make sure we're covered. And we seem to be doing it in a bit of a backwards. We've made the change without legal review. And I have concerns that these changes are quite significant and will not pass legal review. The project has made a decision to have the appendices completed after the student has signed the declaration. And
Correct.
The declaration clearly states that they are taking responsibility for those pieces of information. Now, when we raised this issue once before, what we were told is, well, the student's not going to be responsible for the parent information, the parent or spouse information. And I'm not really sure how you can make a student not responsible for that parent or partner information if it's fraudulent or in error and has resulted in receiving grant funding they're not eligible for. Are you proposing that we're not going to reassess the application and make the student repay it? I mean, they are responsible for all that information. And we've had legal review in the past on these issues, and it was very clear the student must acknowledge any changes to the application.
Yep.
And that's why we have the reassessment declaration so clearly worded as we do. So by the project making the decision to allow for submission of the application prior to the appendices being completed, I think you've exposed us to a significant legal issue. And I would think that we should be reviewing that prior in case it doesn't hold up to legal review. We're not all of a sudden making changes at the end, and now we're in a timeline crunch. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering if with the project, can we get a process in place that where the business has determined there's a significant change to it, the review is done before it's built?
So I don't think we can at this point because we've made some business decisions, but we certainly are making those decisions in consultation with experts and with best practices. And so we don't anticipate there to be any issues, but we certainly are starting that legal process. Even now, we're starting to get ready for that process so that we're not doing it next year. And if as a result of that process, they come back and tell us you can't do it that way, then we'll have to make some adjustments, but we don't anticipate that will be the issue. There might be some tweaks, but not fundamental adjustments based on our initial consultations.
With legal or with best practices?
Various best practices and other areas as well, but no, not with legal. No, we've not had a specific conversation with legal. So we'll start those conversations, but this is in alignment with what other systems do and other best practices. So feel pretty confident, but it's a risk for sure. So, So yeah, there's multiple, and just to remind folks, there are multiple places at which we have some legal involvements, right? We've got the initial declaration when a student makes a change, right? Like a reassessment. Also, the designation agreement is a legally binding agreement that we need to have looked at. So we have a few points at which we definitely look forward to getting some consultation, but again, we don't anticipate major concerns. We're not trying to make fundamental changes with the content of the documents, but there may be some questions about some of our processes. And of course, we'll need to show the legal folks the system, well, here's when they sign it, here's how they sign it, because they'll need to see those documents in context. So we have to find the right time for that.
Would it be
So-
possible to add to your project people then people from the business side or more, I guess, from the policy side? Because ultimately it's the policy that the project is supposed to be enforcing. Wouldn't it be appropriate to have somebody from the policy team or make these little projects, like not just solely sitting with the project side, but to ensure that it's covered appropriately? Because ultimately that's what, like my role as a business application advisor, the project, we're all in service of the policy, and we don't even own all the policy. It's the Fed policy is a lot of it. So I just want to ensure that we've got the right people in the room, whether it's like you've just had a successful project with tuition remittance, you've gone through a process, everybody's gotten in there and gone through it to make sure that we're having the right contacts with the right people. Because we discovered through the social insurance number verification change, Jamie Glennon had done a brilliant job with researching it, but he didn't research it with the right agreement. He thought it was covered under integration. Turns out it's covered under a separate agreement with the SDC. Now we're backpedaling. And well, I see it. My apologies. I see it as backpedaling. That's my perception. You know, we're playing catch up now to make sure that we're covered. And I just think when we have these significant changes, that should be your first step. Let's review and see what we can do before we send Andrew and his team down the wrong path.
Yeah, for sure. And so part of my responsibility is absolutely to consult with a number of different folks. And so I do that pretty regularly, whether that's Rebecca in the policy area or Dominic and Kelly, who are our federal counterparts. I meet regularly with them to talk about issues as well. So at this point, we don't have any concerns about that, but absolutely we continue to try to find opportunities for the front line to be as involved as possible in these processes while still doing their full-time job. So delicate balance for sure. So we've added that, I'm going to call it a deliverable, similar to the financial risks and control review that must be done. There will be a legal review done as well, to make sure that that we're good to go and that we don't have any legal liability issues. So that's been added as well. I don't see any other questions. Did I miss any?
There's one here from Liam, but I'm not sure if what steps are we taking to help ensure that email notifications sent from the new system do not go into spam junk folders?
Oh, that's a good question. Alana, can you help me with that? How do we manage that now? Do you guys monitor the spam and junk, or how do you manage that? Or sorry, Liam, maybe are you talking about emails to the student?
It'll be the other way. Emails to
Yeah,
the
because
student.
this is the email to us, right?
I can jump in on a few things if you
Oh,
want
sure.
on that front. Sorry, Lana, and then you can take over. So with this, one thing that we are doing is the email service that we're currently using is the Government of Canada one, the same one that CRA and some of the other major areas of the federal government uses. So that's what we hook into to send these notifications. So with that, it does a lot of, like, they update their system like hourly basically on a lot of these things. However, a lot of this does lead into if a user basically right clicks an email and says this is spam, or clicks the this is spam button, and basically anything from that address always goes into spam. There's only so much on the technical front we can do because it is going to their client software to use. However, unless there's anything, which, as you noticed, the email, that one's going the other way, so it's not necessarily a good representation. But if there's something in it content-wise that gets flagged, for example, if we say, please click here to win $10,000, that's probably going to get flagged by, for example, Gmail and the different systems. So that's normally that second part to it. So that's just some technical background on it. But Alana, if you want to jump in.
I'm like madly typing Carly on this side. I'm like, VDoc email notifications, it never goes to spam, does it? So she just confirmed that they don't. So, but we do check our spam folder quite often as well. So we have a good eye on that. So.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's a good habit. I know I have to check sometimes too, because I'm like, what is that? And why did that go in there? So, but yeah. So that's a huge, that process is certainly going to make Alana's team life a little easier. They won't have to go to multiple places, and it'll also allow us to continue to use Jira for tracking until such a time that we replace Jira. So that's really useful as well. So appreciate that. Any other questions that we saw, or like I said, Wednesday?
Just a question from Terry there, Elise.
Yep.
Sorry, asking
Okay.
who our legal consult is.
Oh, good question. I don't know. Stuart, do we have that yet? We go through our director of legislation, and they have a contract. And so we need to ask them who that person is right now, because we used to have someone for a long time, but I think it's a new person now. Stuart, do we happen to know the name of that person yet, or is it haven't had a chance to ask yet?
No, I'm going to be in contact.
Oh, can't hear you, Stuart. Sorry.
Sorry.
There we go.
That's better.
Yeah. I'll be contacting Nat Dell, who is the director, shortly to find out who our new consult is.
Yeah. So what happens is our ministry, like a lot of other ministries, we don't have a lawyer on that's specific to our ministry. So there's kind of a pool of lawyers within the BC government that have different portfolios of responsibility. And when we need to avail ourselves of legal services, we go through our director of legislation, and they reach out, and that way they also manage the budgeting, because it costs every time we have to go to them. So we'll work with our director of legislation on that. Any other questions?
There's no other questions that I can see.
Great. So just remind folks then that we were thinking that next Wednesday would be a good time to go over programs and offerings. It's been a little while. And of course, as our understanding evolves a little bit, a good chance to take a look at it again. So we'll go into the system on Wednesday as a student, as an institution user, and of course, as a ministry user to be able to see some of that as well. So we'll do that on Wednesday. If you get a chance and you haven't had a chance to see some of the videos, definitely worth going online. It'll just give you a preliminary. We've certainly evolved since then, but it'll just give you just a brief glance of how it works. Very quick YouTube videos, and then we'll go through it on Wednesday of next week.
Awesome. Well, with that, I didn't see any other questions in the last 10 seconds or so. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your morning and Wednesday. See y'all in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elise.
Thanks.
Yeah.